check that.
That's all right. Leave it on. Let's get started.
Okay.
Y'all ready to light this candle?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are so glad you are here with us, and just by showing up today, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I'm pleased to feature two rock star hit songwriters who've written more top hits with more A-listers than we've ever presented. I promise you will leave today smarter and more inspired than you arrived. Before we get started, let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people in the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and please make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible along the way. And please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the speakers. I want to thank our sponsors, for without their support, we could not keep this free. Special thanks to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Tennessee Brewworks, Project Music, and Cushmaster's brand of CBD products. I also want to introduce a brand new sponsor to our lineup, MedJet. MedJet is the top-rated medical transport and travel security program for people who travel extensively. It provides insurance coverage that gets you to the nearest hospital if needed and finally gets you home. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome Bobby Tomberlin. CMA, ACM, and Grammy nominee, Bobby was raised in Luverne, Alabama, where he was a disc jockey at the age of 11, interviewing icons like Johnny Cash, Waylon, and Tammy Wynette. Bobby was discovered by Mel Tillis and recently celebrated his 26th year as a staff writer for Curb Word Music. Bobby co-wrote One More Day, recorded by Diamond Rio, Daryl Worley's top 10 hit, A Good Day to Run, and the new Willie Nelson Barbra Streisand single, I Want It to Be You. Bobby also has songs recorded by Blake Shelton, Faith Hill, Josh Turner, Kenny Rogers, Joe Nichols, Dolly Parton, Rodney Atkins, Joe Diffie, Dylan Scott, Pam Tillis, Mo Pitney, Jamie Johnson, Jerry Lee Lewis, the Oak Ridge Boys, Thompson Square, and actor Chris Pine. Mo Bandy, Terry Clark, John Schneider, Lee Greenwood, Jamie Seeley, Rhonda Vincent, and many others. I wasn't kidding when I said he's written for some A-listers, was I? Bobby was one of the cast members of the CMT series The Singing Bee for 4 seasons and has appeared on numerous television shows, including Country's Family Reunion, Opry Backstage, and Authentic America. Bobby's been featured in several films, including Wheeler, co-starring Chris Christopherson and Stephen Dorff. Like his current single, Bobby really has lived country music. Welcome, Bobby. So glad you're here with us today.
Oh, gosh, me too.
And joining Bobby as today's special guest is Steve Dorff. Inducted into the prestigious Songwriters Hall of Fame in New York in 2018, Steve's career as a songwriter spans 5 decades, includes more than 40 BMI awards, more than 20 top 10 hits, 12 #1 hits, and American Music Award. The Grammy and Emmy-nominated songwriter and composer has had songs recorded by more than 400 artists from all genres of music, as well as 28 movie scores and countless theme songs and placements on TV series. He's had #1 records across 4 decades. Steve's songs have been recorded by iconic artists such as Barbra Streisand, Celine Dion, Whitney Houston, Kenny Rogers, Anne Murray, George Strait, Garth Brooks, Dolly Parton, Willie Nelson, Dusty Springfield, Blake Shelton, Keb Mo, and countless others. A few chart hits include Kenny Rogers' Through the Years, Anne Murray's I Just Fall in Love Again, George Strait's I Cross My Heart, and Eddie Rabbitt's Which Way But Loose, the title track from Clint Eastwood's 1978 film. Steve has composed music for shows such as Murphy Brown, Growing Pains, Murder, She Wrote, Columbo, Reba, Spencer for Hire, Just the 10 of Us, and The Singing Bee. His film contributions include songs and scores for Pure Country, Bronco Billy, Rocky IV, Tin Cup, and Honky Tonk Man. Branching into stage productions, he wrote the music for the theater production Josephine. In 2017, Steve published his critically acclaimed memoir, I Wrote That One Too, a life in songwriting from Willie to Whitney, and enjoys performing his best loved songs at venues across the country. Please welcome these two incredibly talented songwriters to the smartest people in the room. Take it away, Bobby.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's funny you mentioned I got started in the music business at age 11 in my hometown. I'm actually in my hometown today, so it's kind of cool to be doing this here in Luverne, Alabama, and it's very cool to be doing this with a great friend of mine for 20 years now. And God, we've been through, getting songs recorded, divorces. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So this is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to actually put me back in the interview seat, kind of. So that's going to be enjoyable for me. So anyway, how's things going, Steve?
I'm good. Weather's good today. I've been in the studio the last 3 days, so I'm kind of chilling today, and actually have your good friend Jeff King coming over at 6 to do some guitar overdubs for me.
Oh, cool. He's one of the best guitarists. He's out with Reba too.
Yeah, I love Jeff. He's great.
I want to congratulate you on your recent show at the City Winery. That was such a special evening, especially after 2 years of the whole COVID, people staying in. And I saw people, that I haven't seen in so long. You had such a support group there that evening.
Oh, it's crazy turnout. I never know what to expect. I'm this, Oz behind the curtain, anonymous guy who's written the soundtrack of people's lives, and nobody knows who I am. So it's always fun to see who shows up. And of course, it was a hometown crowd, and my first time playing in Nashville since I moved here. And so I was really blessed and very happy to see the turnout. It
was cool too, the guest. I mean, that said a lot for you, that people like Jeffrey Still and Phil Vassar, John Barry, and Kev Moe. I mean, they were a part of the show, and you have a song on the new Kev Moe record.
I've got 2 on the new.
Two.
Yeah. And of course, John Barry's album, the new album, I produced and wrote. I arranged and produced the entire album, and then Jeffrey and I and Phil and I have been writing together, and Phil actually has recorded a new song that we wrote together. So yeah, it was. Those guys just make me look really good. So it was fun.
Before we really dig into a lot of your history, let's promote the John Barry record. It was just released.
Came out 2 weeks ago, and or tomorrow will be 2 weeks on Gaither. It's called "Find My Joy," and which is the title song, which I co-wrote, and quite a story because of what John's been through with his cancer treatment. He had tonsil and throat cancer, and it was a miracle that he survived, not only survived, but could sing again. And it was a very emotional making of the album, because it was not an easy record to make, challenging in a number of ways, and but I've never been prouder of any record I've ever made.
Wow. Well, I definitely encourage everyone to check that out, because it's a special piece of work. You know what? Let's dig into like some of your history now. Okay, you grew up in New York, and what's the first music you remember ever hearing?
Probably the music in my head. I've had this mini orchestra in my head since before I can remember, and anything I ever saw or experienced, I musicalized. So And I often tell the story about being in a snowball fight, in Queens, New York, at 7 years old or 5 years old with my friends, and there were big snow drifts in these parking lots where we'd go and have these big snowball fights. And the idea was to hide behind the snow drifts and not get hit by flying ice in the face. And so I would be in the middle of all my friends throwing snowballs. I'd be getting hit left and right, but I'd be musicalizing the whole thing. Very strange. I mean, it's hard to explain. If I was in the car with my mother and the windshield wipers were doing this, all of a sudden that would become a musical event for me. So I think the first music I remember hearing is music that I was creating.
Did you come from a musical family?
Nope.
That's always fascinating to me. Someone that just had it in them from the very beginning like that, but yet didn't come from, a mother playing or.
Yeah, and then as a teenager, I knew I had this strange gift or whatever you want to call it. And so I would start developing emotional things that I'd be feeling or seeing or being involved in. A little league game where someone hit a home run, I would, everybody else would be cheering. I'd be hearing this orchestral underscore.
Wow.
And so I would be underscoring most of what I was living, and I still do to this day. And it's kind of what segued me into, from writing songs as a teenager, into when I first got the opportunity to do film and TV music as an older person. It became so easy because I realized that I'd been doing that my entire life without knowing it. And so for me to look at film and visualize, whether it be a motorcycle chase or a love scene or a robbery, or it just came naturally to me.
That's amazing. I've never heard anyone else, have a story like that. Let me ask you this, like, who are some of the artists that really just changed your life, that really inspired you growing up?
Well, as a kid, I listened to Broadway. That's what was always in my house. My mother would play, and my sister, who was 10 years older than me, loved show music. And so the great Broadway songwriters, Lerner and Lowe and Rodgers and Hammerstein and Leonard Bernstein, and that was the music that I loved, that I was passionate about. I could listen to those melodies and those songs all day long. But as a teenager, of course, when the British invasion hit, I would watch Hullabaloo and Shindig and the Ed Sullivan Show. And so I was, my dream to watch those shows and see all these British artists, and not just the Beatles or the Stones, but Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck and Petula Clark and the artists that were singing great songs. My whole passion was, I want to write for that guy. I want to write for her. I want to write a song that Petula Clark sings. I want to write a song that the Righteous Brothers sing, and I got to do that. That to me is, of all the other things, the versatility and the ability to the realization that, I set out to write a song for the Righteous Brothers, and Bill Medley ended up recording 6 or 7 of my songs, or Kenny Rogers, when he was with the First Edition, saying, wow, I'd love to write a song for that guy.
And you became friends with Dave Clark, right?
Yeah, Dave Clark of the Dave Clark Five. We became good friends. And
didn't you tell me that you actually would go to the Ed Sullivan Show?
I did go to the Ed Sullivan Show a couple times.
Yeah, who were the guests on that show when you went?
Jackie Wilson.
Oh, wow.
uh, the Dave Clark Five, Jerry and the Pacemakers. A lot of those British acts. I was 13, 14 years old, but I lived in New York. And so it was, that was, that's always what I wanted to do. I mean, I never strayed from that focus, as to, now I never got Jerry and the Pacemakers to do one of my songs, but I did get Ringo. So,
Yeah.
I got to do a movie song with Ringo, and that was one of the greatest thrills of my life, musically.
It's funny, like I'm from a very small town, and there's people here all the time. They go to places like New York to school, or maybe California or Chicago, but it was a different story for you. You actually left New York and went to Georgia. I mean, how did that come about?
Well, my parents, old school, did not want me playing for tips in a jar when I was 50 or 60 years old. And they thought music was a great hobby, but they wanted me to be either a doctor or a lawyer or, the traditional old school, music's great, but you need a real job to fall back on. And so I applied to some colleges and got into University of Georgia, and really it was eeny, meeny, miny, mo, who had the best football team at the time. I mean, it sounds kind of weird, but that was my criterion. And so I went to Georgia, majored in partying, and it's a miracle that I graduated, but I told them I would do that, and I did. So that's how I got to Georgia. And while I was there, of course, I seeked out, are there any music publishers in Georgia? And of course, Bill Lowry at the time was very big in Atlanta. So I would end up a couple of days a week cutting classes and driving to Atlanta and hanging out there in the hopes of maybe, getting someone to hear some songs. And I did. And Bill Lowry actually signed me to a publishing deal. And I was 19, 20 years old. And that was my beginning. And then started working in the studio with the great artists that they had, Ray Stevens and Joe South and Billy Joe Royal and the Classics Four and Tommy Rowe. And you and I always kid about that, my first cut was the Tams.
Wow.
The Atlanta Tams, I think were their names. And they had a couple of hits, actually.
It's interesting, you being in Georgia, you were so close to Nashville, and you had already had a little success in Georgia. It seems like, it would have been so easy just to go on to Nashville. Why Los Angeles?
I think because I was very passionate about writing music for film. That was always what I wanted to do. I never had the ambition to be in a band or to be a performer. That just wasn't what I was passionate about. What I was passionate about was being in the recording studio, working with great voices. I always joke, I've told you this a million times, when you hear me sing two of my songs, everybody immediately knows why they never heard me on the radio. And so for me, it was all about, how do I get a great artist like a Celine Dion or a Barbara Streisand or a Blake Shelton or Kenny Rogers to do what I'm hearing in my head. And that was what I set out to do. And that was my road.
Describe Los Angeles when you arrived there.
Oh, it was the heyday. It was 1974. And palm trees, which I had never seen.
Wow.
Sunset Boulevard, all the, Ciros and the Brown Derby and all the 77 Sunset Strip and all the things that I had seen as a kid on TV movie stars, just in restaurants. Uh, it was a fairy tale.
God, I would have given anything. And I mean, I've had so many great times in Los Angeles, most of them with you, but gosh, I can't imagine what that was like in the 70s.
Yeah, and from what I understand, the '60s was great too. You know, Desilu and you know, the great TV shows and the great movies and the history. And I mean, nobody knows history better than you do. I just got to kind of see it, you know, from the fringes. And then fortunately, because a man named Snuff Garrett signed me to kind of move me out there to be in it, I got to start to see it from the inside. I got to work with the Wrecking Crew at the tail end, the great players, the Tommy Tedesco and Hal Blaine and Larry Knechtel and Sid Sharp and his string.
Wow.
And I got my first sessions that I was thrown into doing as an arranger, string arranger, and as a keyboard player. I was thrown into sessions with Cher and Melissa Manchester.
But you didn't connect with Snuff until you actually moved to Los Angeles, right?
He moved me out.
Oh, he actually did move.
Yeah, I went out about 2 months or 3 months before I moved there with enough money to last me a week. My sister loaned me, I think, $500. And I went to Los Angeles to pitch songs and see if I could get anything going there. I mean, how stupid is that, to think that I could go to Los Angeles and in 1 week actually connect with someone? And sure enough, I knocked on doors, left demos at the producers that I had always loved their music, Jerry Fuller and Ted Glasser, and all the ones that were doing all the Jack Gold. And of course, I didn't hear anything. And I happened to leave some songs at Snuff Garrett's office, and lo and behold, I got a phone call saying, can you meet with Snuff? He heard your songs and wants to meet with you. And I ran down to the office. It was 7 o'clock at night, and I was staying in this little flea bit hotel on Sunset Boulevard, Motel 6, and the beeper on my phone was flashing in the room, and I picked it up, and it was Snuff Garrett's secretary saying, call. And I called, and it was like 7 o'clock at night, and they were there. And she answered, and she said, hold on for Snuff. And he got on the phone, and he said, what are you doing right now? I said, nothing. He said, come to the office right now. And I did. I got in my rent-a-car, drove over to 6255 Sunset, where I'd spend the next 10 years in my office. And I played him a few songs, and he said, come to LA, I'll move you out here. I said, well, I have a 6-month-old son, baby, and he said, no worries. He says, I'll pick up all the costs. I want you to come out here and write for me. And it was a miracle. It was a miracle.
And Snuff had just an amazing career already in music. And didn't you tell me that you kind of took Leon Russell's place in his company?
Yeah. Leon had been Snuff's right-hand arranger, co-producer, music guy. I mean, Snuff wasn't a music guy. He didn't know a C sharp from an X, but he did know hit songs. He had that gift of knowing what a hit was, and what he did was surround himself with great players and great talent, and create great records. And that's what a lot of the producers back in that era did. They weren't the players that the producers of today are. They couldn't, Snuff couldn't play an instrument, couldn't sing, he couldn't, but they knew songs. Donnie Kirshner, who created Monkeys. These guys, Clive Davis, Jack Gold, they knew songs. and that was what drew me there, that, because I'm a song guy, and I just got lucky. I always say a big part of my career was manifest destiny. And I can't tell you how much I believe in that. Willing certain things to happen,
Right.
and just being at the right place at the right time. And that's happened so many times for me in the course of, God, going on 5 decades of doing this. And
Unreal. The thing I find interesting about Snuff Garrett, I never met him, but I was in radio during that time when he was co-producing so many hit songs, is how he could just pull an artist, bring an artist back that had been, out of the charts for a long time. I mean, even people like Roy Rogers. You had a song recorded by Roy Rogers, and it was a hit.
First top 10, Hoppy, Gene, and Me. And Snuff called me into his office one day, and he said, I need you to write a song called Hoppy, Gene, and Me. I said, what? It's Hopalong, Gene Autry, and me, meaning Roy Rogers. And I'm going to go to Apple Valley with the song where Roy Rogers lives, and we're going to record it on Roy Rogers, and we're going to have a top 10 record. And I said, really? And it happened.
That's so bizarre for a guy that grew up in New York, and here you are writing for these cowboy heroes. Well, but it worked, and it was good.
Yeah, we had Rex Allen Sr. and Rex Allen Jr. both do little voices, and yeah, Snuff was from Texas. And a lot of people always ask me, well, how did you get into country music? And I said, I didn't see a tree until I was 14, and we played stickball on cement. We played football and baseball on cement, nearly killed ourselves if we were, so I couldn't spell country music. I didn't understand it. I didn't know anything about it. And, but Snuff, coming from, Texas and growing up in it, he was as big an aficionado of country music as you are, believe it or not. And him would have really gotten along great because he knew everybody. He would name Gene Watson. I'd go, I don't know who Gene. I didn't know who Willie Nelson was until I started working with Snuff. And when he started wanting to record those artists, Brenda Lee and Tanya Tucker, and all of a sudden I was thrown into that world, and bingo,
But your melodies brought something totally different to these artists. Like I remember when I would hear, whether it was a Brenda or a Tanya or whomever, you just have that special, your own stamp that you bring to a song. And it just always stood out to me when I would play those songs in radio, whether it was Merle Haggard or even Mel Tillis. And what was so wild about the Snuff Garrett time, then you just ended up co-producing and some huge records. I mean, and from his country background, I guess he knew who Lefty Frizzell was, he knew who Dottie West was, and then that, there you go, Shelley and David. And then you were involved in one of the biggest songs, really, one of the biggest duets of all time, You're the Reason God Made Oklahoma.
Frizzell and West. That was when, Snuff had been relying on me more and more in the studio to actually make the records and work with younger players. Because a lot of as radio was changing and as music was changing, not only country music, but pop music, really, because I was a pop guy. So as pop music started sounding different and disco came in, the Wrecking Crew guys were no longer the A-listers. Hal Blaine, who probably was the most recorded drummer in the history of recorded music, just, they didn't know what a click track was. Their time was not impeccable. The guitar players, the style of music was changing. And so Snuff relied on me to find those new young players and bring them in. And so that's when he decided, you know what, I'm going to make you, he was generous. He gave me the opportunity to start producing with him. And yeah, Frizzell West came along at the time when I was doing the Eastwood movies, all the music, and it became a great opportunity for me,
And speaking of Clint Eastwood, then you end up co-writing a #1 song for Merle Haggard and Clint Eastwood. I mean, who would have ever imagined?
Yeah, that was, after Every Which Way But Loose, which Milton and I wrote, Milton Brown. You have a big #1 like that, like Every Which Way But Loose, and then all of a sudden, it's like anything. If a real estate guy sells a multi-million-dollar house, all of a sudden he's the go-to guy to get your listing. It's the same in showbiz. It's the same in you write a hit screenplay, and all of a sudden you're A-list. And it was no different with songwriting. And so yeah, Clint called one day and said, I want to sing, and I said, really? What do you say to that? Can you sing? I'm not going to insult him. And of course, Snuff got involved and said, oh, I got a great idea for a song. Barroom Buddies, and we'll get Merle Haggard to do a duet with you. And Clint said, okay. And then we hung up the phone and he says, go write Barroom Buddies. I said, okay. So I called Milton up. I said, let's write a song called Barroom Buddies for Haggard and Eastwood. And I said, by the way, who's Merle Haggard? And
oh my gosh.
And no, and the truth is, one of the best records I've ever made was Misery and Gin, and by Merle Haggard, of course. And I will always indelibly remember that session because we were at the old Wally Hyder's RCA studios, huge, like a barn of a studio, big sound stage. And I had 60 pieces and maybe 40 strings. And Merle came in and he looked at the room, and you could tell he was like, whoa, this is not what I'm used to. And he looked, and they put him behind this baffle right behind me because I was conducting the orchestra. And I looked back at him like, everything okay? Can you hear everything okay? He says, I've never seen so many damn fiddles in one room in my life. And we cut Misery and Gin in one take, vocal and everything, orchestra, vocal. It was magic. And then we did Barroom Buddies as the second track. So we cut both those tracks in the same day, and that was a pretty magical day.
That was such a magical time with film soundtracks too.
Mm-hmm.
Something that we don't have now. People just seem to kind of rush and throw together some film music. But at that time, just those Eastwood films, I remember Any Which Way You Can. Ray Charles was on the soundtrack, Fats Domino, and you wrote the Ray Charles duet.
Glenn Campbell, yeah. It's funny, I can talk about some of this stuff because they're not here anymore. But yeah, I was such a big Ray Charles fan, and when I found out that they wanted Ray to sing the opening song of Any Which Way You Can, we had already cut Any Which Way You Can with Glenn Campbell, and it was a great record. And then Clint decided, I want that at the end of the movie. I want Glenn to sing it on camera in the movie to tease it, and then Any Which Way You Can, the song, over the end credits. And I want to do a duet with Ray Charles over the opening. And I said, okay. And of course, Snuff, God bless him, came up with one of the dumbest titles. So He came into my office one day and he said, "Beers to you." I said, "Excuse me?" "Beers to you. Write it." So I wrote "Beers to You" with, I can't remember, with John Durrell and I forget who else.
Hey, but Ray Charles cut your song, so
Yeah, but it was, it was one of those records where you get in the studio and everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. It was not a good song, number one. I was almost embarrassed to have written it. I didn't even want my name on it.
oh wow.
And of course, that was kind of true with Coca-Cola Cowboy too, but that turned out really great.
Yeah.
But "Beers to You" was one of those. Yeah, you know what? The best thing about that day was I got a picture with me and Ray Charles, because the song was horrible. The record was horrible. Ray was.
Yeah, but you can still say you wrote a song for Ray Charles.
No. I've been in the studio with icon after icon. I mean, doing Fats Domino was so much fun. Fats was actually a really cool guy, nice guy. Couldn't play in time to save his life. His band was god awful. That I did a brass session with the guys in Vegas. I had to fly to Vegas to do what was the name of that song I did with them?
Whiskey Heaven.
Whiskey Heaven. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I fly to Vegas because that's where Fats and his band were performing, and they couldn't come to LA. And so I go there, and fortunately, I brought a couple of ringer guys to come to Vegas with me, John Hobbs and I think Billy Walker. And I don't know if Joe Chimay came with me or not. I ended up overdubbing them, but I had to use Fats' band because he wanted it. And he had brass players. He had like 6 brass players, and they were all out of tune. And one guy was playing strange notes, and I walked out to his music stand, and because I had parts all written out, and I looked at his music stand. He had the music upside down, and I said, "I think if you flip it over right side up, you might be able, might have a little better." He just laughed. He says, "I don't read music."
Oh, how funny.
Yeah, but again, manifest destiny. Somehow that song came out really good. I went back to LA and overdubbed different guys on it and just kept Fats' voice. And
what a great story. You mentioned
everything was tape. We didn't have Pro Tools. We didn't, everything was 24-track tape.
You mentioned co-writing Every Which Way But Loose for Eddie Rabbitt. Didn't they reach out to Neil Diamond to write that song in the beginning?
I can't say who the big artist was, but there was there was a major artist that had written a song for that movie. And because Warner Brothers Pictures wanted this artist to be and Clint, to his credit, just had so much power. Even though Warner Brothers hated that movie, they did not like that movie. He was coming off all these Dirty Harry movies that were box office monsters, and all of a sudden he's doing this movie about an orangutan and fist fighting, and he's driving an old pickup truck, and it's like, what the hell, And but Clint didn't like the song, and he just stood his ground. He said, no, I need another song. This is a musical picture. And I got a phone call from Snuff, and late, I think it was about 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. And he said, I need a song called Every Which Way But Loose. I said, okay. And he said, I said, when do you need it? He says, tomorrow morning. We need to go over and play for Clint Eastwood. So I hung up and I called Milton Brown. It was about 8 o'clock at night when I called Milton. It was 10 o'clock in Mobile, Alabama. And Milton picked up the phone. He was sleeping, and he said, I hope someone died or something, some stupid thing in order for you to wake me up, you know. And I said, no, I need a lyric, you know. I don't even know what this means. Every which way but loose. He says, yeah. He says, yeah, you love me every which way. You turn me every which way but loose. I said, okay, let's write it. We wrote it over the phone in about 30, 40 minutes. Next day,
Wow.
yeah, went in, played it for Snuff. The next morning, he called Steve Wax, who was then the CEO or president of Elektra Asylum Records, who was the music supervisor. We all went over to Warner's studios, and Clint came in. I played it for him at the piano. He said, that's the song. And we got Eddie Rabbitt, who was the hot new young guy at Warner's, or at Elektra Asylum, to do the record.
Wow. And while we're talking about Clint Eastwood, he really opened the door for you when it came to scoring too, right?
It was my first shot at it. And I had no idea what I was doing, you know, other than being able to dream up the music. I could hear it, but I didn't know the mechanics of film then. And I went to school on that movie with a guy named Don Harris, who was Clint's longtime music editor. And he really took me to school, fast-tracked my education in film music.
You mentioned your
5 movies with Clint.
wow.
5 in a row.
You mentioned your offices there on Sunset Boulevard. Who were some of the other people in the building at that time?
Well, we were in a building called the UCB building, United California Bank. It later became the Motown building because Motown came in and took the top 2 floors. Jim Ed Norman was there. Mercury Records was there. The Welk Music Group was there, publishing companies. Warner Chappell it was Chappell Music back then, was there. It was a big music building. Michael Jackson and Joe Jackson, his dad.
And you would see Michael in the elevator,
Right in the elevator with Smokey Robinson, with Michael Jackson, with Toto, with I mean,
unbelievable.
There's always, you know, I got songs recorded just by being in the elevator. You know, the elevator opened. I got a Smokey Robinson cut once just because I happened to be in the elevator at the right time with Eddie Lambert, who was
Wow.
in art for Motown, and he said, "I need a song for DeBarge." I go, "Oh, okay," and I said, "I just did a demo of a song that could be kind of cool, like a DeBarge thing, you know, Boys to Men-ish kind of thing." And he said, "Send it up to me." I got off at 10th floor. He went up to 15. I sent him up this demo about an hour later. He called me back the next morning. He said, "I got some good news and bad news." I said, give me the bad news. He said, DeBarge passed on your song. I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate you playing it for them. I really do. Thanks, Eddie." And he said, I said, "What's the good news?" He says, "Well, while I was playing the song, after that meeting, I was playing the song a couple more times and the door opened and some guy poked his head in and he said, 'What's that song you're playing?' And he said, 'Oh, it's a song that Steve Dorff gave me.' And he says, 'I want to cut that. Give me a copy of that.' And it was Smokey Robinson.
Wow.
And we went in and cut it the next week.
Wow.
All because I got on the elevator at 10 minutes after 2 instead of 20 minutes after 2.
Yeah, right. You know, I've said this many times. I don't know anyone who has such a variety of artists to record their songs. I mean, my gosh, you know, in the country field, from Mel Tillis, Merle Haggard, George Strait, Kenny Rogers, Eddie Arnold, the Oak Ridge Boys, to people like John Travolta, Clint Eastwood having a #1, Whitney Houston, Barbra Streisand, Dionne Warwick, Celine Dion. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And no wonder you were inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame the very first year you were nominated. You so deserve that.
Thanks, Bobby. Thank you.
And, you know, and I love to tell people, I say this often about you. I'm like, you know, Steve is not one of those guys, oh yeah, that was his time period. You're still rocking. I mean, you had a Garth Brooks hit like 3 years ago. Little Big Town has recorded through the years for this new Kenny Rogers tribute record. I mean, you're so.
Rascal Flatts did a great version of Through the Years too on their
That's right.
last CD. Yeah.
But you're writing. I mean, it's just it's timeless, and I've been blessed to have a lot of songs recorded with you. I mean, one of the highlights of my career is having a song recorded by Barbara Streisand, and it wouldn't have happened without you. I mean, you already had the history with Barb, but the reality is it has to be a great song. That's got to be one of the toughest pitches ever. And to have Barbara and Willie and Barbara and Blake record our song, that was just, it's still hard to believe sometimes.
No, I've had a lot of pinch me moments, you know, pinch myself to, is this really happening? And Barbara Streisand, you know, growing up listening to her singing People, you know, from Funny Girl, and watching that movie 8,000 times, and just to get one song recorded by her, let alone 5. I mean,
Oh yeah, right.
It's just
you had the title cut of her Higher Ground CD.
That was my first with Barbara, and I've been on 4 albums and doing a thing now for a duet for her, and that hopefully we'll be doing sometime this summer.
You know, a lot of people don't realize how long it takes for a song to, you know, get cut, get recorded, if it ever does, and then for it to make it to the radio. And my gosh, you have so many like 10-year stories, like that song "I Cross My Heart." I mean, a lot of people, well, most people don't know that Bette Midler recorded that before George Strait.
Yeah, well, actually, Eric Kaz and I wrote that song, and we had, and I don't generally, you know, as songwriters, we're always asked, a frequently asked question is, did you have the artist in mind when you wrote the song? And invariably, it's always no for me. I just write, you know. And Kaz and I got together and we wrote this really cool song called "I Cross My Heart." And I started, the way I was playing it, I said, you know, this would really be cool, like for a Boys to Men kind of groove. And so we demoed it that way, as kind of an R&B pop-ish song. And got to play it for the guys, Boys to Men. They didn't like it. And so we pitched it to some other people, publishers, and not one of your best. I went back in with a girl, Susie Benson, did a really cool version of it. And lo and behold, Arif Mardin, the great producer, hears it and says, I'm cutting this song with Bette Midler. And they cut it. And to Bette's credit, it just wasn't the right marriage between a song and an artist. And if you don't have that marriage between the right voice and the right song, it can't be a hit. And at least that's my way of thinking. And they took it off the project. They took it off the album. To her credit, she just wasn't feeling it. And Arif called me and he said, I'm so sorry. I love this song, but just wasn't in the cards. And, you know, and it was a tough one to take because I really wanted that one. And I played that song for everyone I knew, and including my mother, for the next 6 or 7 years. And everybody had the same reaction. Nah, I'm not one of your best. And when my mother tells me that, I'm thinking, holy shit, it must not be, you know. And so here I am getting hired to do a movie called Pure Country by my good friend Chris Kane, the director. And he calls me one night and he says, I've listened to 500 songs for the end love song that George has got to sing to the girl in the movie. I can't find it. I just, nothing's killing me. I said, let me play you one song that I think would work great, because I had the script. I was doing all the music for the scoring the movie, and I sent him over I Crossed My Heart, and he loved it. He said, we're getting on a plane. We're going to go play this for George, which we did. We flew from LA to Nashville, I think 3 or 4 days later. George didn't love it. I'm putting that mildly. And but fortunately, we got him to agree to do it. Jerry Weintraub was a very powerful producer, and he wanted that song in the movie. And we got George to do it. And of course, George killed it. And it became that magical marriage between the right voice and the right song and the right arrangement. And big hit, 8 years after I wrote it.
And it was voted in the top 10 CMT's
Greatest, ninth greatest love song ever written.
Yeah.
You know, I guess Boys to Men wasn't the right call. So.
You know, another song of yours it's timeless. You still hear it so often. I think it's been played over 5 million times on the radio, and that's Through the Years. It was made famous by Kenny Rogers, but Lionel Richie was supposed to record that originally, right?
Lionel had the song and was talking about recording it with the Commodores, and again, a song that was passed on by Barry Manilow, Glenn Campbell, and Kenny was the right time, right place, right song, right artist.
You actually pitched that to Glenn in person, didn't you?
I did, and that was, I can't tell that story on.
I remember.
You got to read about it in my book.
Yeah, I remember that story very well, and that's a good time to plug your book. Share about your book.
Yeah, I was asked to write a memoir, which after, it's funny, I was doing this little gig in Connecticut, I forget where in Connecticut, and this woman came up to me after the show and said, you know, you don't sing worth a shit, but your stories are fun and really great. You should write a book. And I said, well, I don't exactly know how to take that as a compliment, or, but thank you. And it turns out she was a literary agent. And
oh, wow.
I get you a book deal. Will you write the book? And I said, yeah, right. Okay, sure. You know, I got enough issues with trying to write a great 4-minute song, 3.5 to 4-minute song. How am I going to write a book? And about 4 months later, she emailed me and she said, better start writing. She got me a deal. And it turned out to be one of the most cathartic, incredible processes of my life, not just from a musical standpoint, but just to have the opportunity to look back at things that I had forgotten about, things that I didn't necessarily want to remember about my growing up. It was a very cathartic experience, on top of losing a lot of people during the process of writing that book. And but it served me very well, both professionally and personally. I wish I had a copy of it.
I was going to say they can just go to your website and get a copy. Yeah, let's plug.
Plug. It's called I Wrote That One Too, and a story and songwriting from Willie to Whitney, and it's available on my website, stevedorf.com, or on amazon.com. But if you get it through my website, I'll sign them. And yeah, and a lot of the stories that are in the book are well elaborated because I had a lot of time to think about all the details, who threw the hair dryer that missed my head by this much when I walked into Glenn Campbell's house to play him Through the Years.
You have no doubt the greatest stories. And before we end, you mentioned Whitney Houston. you got to share that story. I mean, that's one of the greatest songwriter stories I've heard, when she recorded your song.
Yeah, well, I'd worked with Jermaine Jackson on his last Motown album, and I hadn't seen Jermaine in 3 or 4 years. And he called me and said, Steve, I'm looking for a song like we did the last time, but a duet. I'm making my first album for Arista Records. And I said, oh, wow, Dionne Warwick or Aretha Franklin, and I started getting revved up. And he said, yeah, he said, you got anything? I said, yeah, of course. Yeah, sure. I didn't, but I didn't think I did. And, but I'm not going to say no, because then you're out of the ball game.
Right.
So I said, when do you need it? He says, I'm recording at 4:00 this afternoon. So I got on the phone, I stuck a couple of cassettes in my pocket and drove over to the studio, and he came out, he got in my car, and I pulled this song out and stuck it in the cassette player in the car, and Jermaine's doing this, rocking to it, and he stops after the first chorus. He says, that's it, that's the song. Great. I say, do you mind me asking, Dionne or Aretha? He says, oh no, it's this new girl from New Jersey. She's beautiful. She's a model, and she sings really good. And I was really disappointed, on the drive home. I mean, you and I always, exaggerate. We say we're going to slit our wrists if this doesn't happen, or hang myself. And I was pretty depressed. I really wanted Aretha, and I said, what's her name? And he says, oh, Whitney Houston. You've never heard of her. She's never recorded before. And I'm thinking, oh, geez, this is going to, we'll sell five copies. But came out on Jermaine's album, and Jermaine sold 2 million albums. It was a big album. And then Clive Davis called me and said, hey, we're going to do this album on this Whitney Houston solo album, and I'd like to put your song on that as well. Really, really loved the way it came out, and it was never a single by Jermaine. And I said, great, we'll sell another 5 or 10 albums, and I think it's at 27 million now.
Unbelievable.
So when Count Dracula wants to record one of my songs, I'd say, absolutely, go for it.
No doubt.
You never, the truth is, you never know who the next Whitney Houston's going to be.
You don't.
And
That's, something else I do want to plug here and talk about is you're performing. I remember a time you very seldom would you even perform a song at an event. And then you started doing these songwriter shows. And again, you have the best stories. And I'm so glad you're doing that. And you have some dates coming up. Would you like to share?
I'm doing two nights in Annapolis, Maryland, May 20th and 21st. I'm doing Steamboat Springs, Colorado on July 3rd. I don't do that many. It's something, because fortunately my phone's still ringing. I'm still in the studio a lot, making records and writing songs. And so I try to balance the two. But I'm having a lot of fun with it. I was encouraged by people like you and Paul Williams and my son, Andrew, encouraged me a while back, saying, Dad, or Steve, you need to be the face of your songs. And it's really been, I think the Hall of Fame induction and the book kind of catapulted me into believing I could do that. And so
Absolutely.
I'm having a lot of fun with it.
That's just the coolest. And like I said earlier, you deserve any award that you receive, because you've just been a mainstay for so many years now. And again, I love the fact that you are just as, as Bill Anderson says, fired up as ever, but it's true. You really are.
I just produced Bill.
I know.
Did a record on Bill Anderson, and he and I were inducted together in 2018. thanks to you too. I mean, look, we haven't really been talking too much about you, but you've been a great friend through a lot of times, a lot of rough times, a lot of really rough times, and you've been there for me, and I feel like I've been there for you.
Oh, you've definitely been.
And just thank you for doing this today.
Oh, I've had a great time, and to be honest with everyone, this is kind of like the way a normal, a dinner is. When we have dinner, we share stories like this, and it's always wonderful.
I see this chat thing at the bottom of the screen. I don't know how to. Maybe Tom knows that. I see we have 78, or I don't know what that means, but
I know. I think I saw David Briggs. He's watching, actually. He worked with Elvis, and our friend Lisa Rowland, Tracy Eason, Freddie Lockett. So many people are tuning in.
See, yeah, maybe Tom, I can look at those later. Is there a way to look at
absolutely. Steve, there's one question that was posed in the Q&A I'd like to ask on behalf of the audience, if you'll indulge us, and that is, who are some of the songwriters who inspired you?
Oh, that's easy. Lerner and Lowe, Burt Bacharach and Jimmy Webb and Dave Grusin. Those are the people I love to listen to, and have grown up listening to throughout the years. I mean, obviously so many, Lennon and McCartney, but those, what comes immediately to the top of my head are the ones I mentioned.
Right on. Well, Bobby, you did a fabulous job conducting this session today. I thank you. I'd love to have you back on as a guest so we can learn your story as well as you drew Steve's out. So if you would consider indulging us with one of those in the future, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, I would love that. But thank you so much for this opportunity, because, I think Steve's manager, Brian, said it in the beginning. He said, I don't think we can get anyone that knows more about Steve's history, because like I said, when I was down here working in radio, I would spin the records, and I kept seeing that name Dorff. And I randomly gave him a call. He didn't know who I was. He knew a couple of my songs 20 years ago, and, one co-write, and then it was like, the Dorf family, their extended family. And it was just wonderful doing this today. Thank you, Tom.
Well, thank you. And to both of you, thank you for the music. Plain and simple. You guys have delivered hit after hit after hit. It's incredible to have you as guests. And thank you. And I hope that you all continue doing what God put you on earth to do, because we will all benefit greatly from it if you do. To the audience, thank you for your continued attention here. We appreciate it. We'll be back next week with another incredible lineup. I'll be announcing soon. And to everyone else out there, stay safe, be nice to each other, and get a shot if you haven't gotten one. We'll see you soon, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.